Now, earlier today, the former Australian ambassador to Israel, now Liberal Senator Dave Sharma, held a joint press conference at Parliament House in Canberra with Jewish Labor MP Josh Burns to condemn the anti-Semitic attack.
To target the Jewish community in Sydney, in their homes and on the streets, is anti-Semitism. Plain and simple. This is not about politics. This is about making sure Australians can be safe in their homes and in their streets. And the sort of vandalism and the sort of violence we saw last night has no place in Australia.
Yeah, to discuss this, Senator Dave Sharma joined me from Parliament House.
Well, look, I got in touch with Josh Burns this morning. I've known him for a number of years, and he's represents a community with a large number of Jewish people as well. And I suggested to him that it might be helpful if we both went out and condemned this as a show of, broad condemnation across the political spectrum, that whatever your views about the conflict overseas, the sort of violence and intimidation we're seeing on the streets of Sydney and Australia, but those events last night have no place in Australia, and they're condemned across the spectrum.
Now, you've been giving praise to the police for taking this seriously, and yes, they've described it as a hate crime, and they've set up a special task force to investigate. But the police also said this was an isolated incident. Surely it's anything but. We've seen a rise in anti-Semitism, attacks, graffiti across the country, and particularly in the eastern suburbs of Sydney for over a year now.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree that it's an isolated incident at all, Chris. And as I said today, I mean, it's part of a pattern of behaviour that we have seen consistently now over the last 14 months. Attacks directed at Jewish Australians designed to intimidate, instill fear and silence them, stop them from speaking out, stop them from identifying themselves as Jewish. So I'm pleased that the police, in my conversations with them, seem to be taking this seriously. I think a task force is good. They've got counter-terrorism and hate crime units involved, which I think is important. But the proof will be in the pudding here. I mean, we need to see people arrested, we need to see people charged, and we need to see people sentenced for this, because until we start seeing that happening, I don't think we're sending the deterrent message we need to these radical actors in our midst.
Now, the location was fascinating because there is a Jewish hospital around the corner, but this was largely outside a restaurant that's got no particular connection to the Jewish community and other houses. Nearby is the Turkish consulate, and there was the graffiti of PKK, which could be a representation of a Kurdish militant group that's active in Turkey. Does that disturb you?
Yeah, I'm curious to know what the connection is there, because you're right. The PKK is it's a Kurdish nationalist group that has been outlawed as a terrorist organisation by Turkey. There is a Turkish consulate in the area. There's also the Russian consulate nearby, and in fact, a number of consular buildings are in that part of Wallara. But I am curious to know what, if there is a link there, and of course to find out the perpetrators of the actors. I mean, Kurds and Jews have traditionally, as peoples anyway, had okay relations, I would say. Not warm, but not as hostile as you might have between other people. So this would seem a little strange to me, but hopefully the investigation will reveal more.
All right, my real concern here, as I've outlined at the top of the program, is these concerns about anti-Semitic behaviour in this country. Since October the 8th last year, we've seen the celebration of the slaughter at Lakemba. We've seen the chants at the Opera House steps. We've seen Hamas and Hezbollah flags. We've seen intimidatory protests. We've seen graffiti attacks like this. I say that at every step along the way, the Anthony Albanese Labor government has been too weak. I think our state governments and state police forces should have done more. Don't we? I know it's getting very late, but if this stuff is escalating, we need stronger statements, stronger action from politicians and police authorities.
I agree wholeheartedly, Chris. It's clear that the actions that have been taken to date are not deterring this. I mean, this attack last night is just one in a number of episodes like this. Just last month, we saw protests glorifying Hassan Nasrallah, again chanting slogans directed at Jews. I mean, Jewish Australians who are as entitled to feel safe in their homes and communities and as entitled to exercise their political rights as any Australians have not felt that safety and comfort that they should have felt over the last 14 months. And that's a failure on authorities, but it's most profoundly a failure on government, state and federal, to, if they're current tactics are not working, if this problem is not going away, they need to up the effort, up the rhetoric, up the resources, and up the policing intensity.
And this is fundamental to this nation. This is bigger than Jewish Australians, as important as that is. But the fundamental premise of this nation is that we should live here in harmony and tolerate other people of other ethnic backgrounds and other faiths. And this is being undermined. This social cohesion is being undermined right before our very eyes.
I agree, and I think this is a very important point. There's some people who think, look, this is just an issue between Jewish Australians and people who care about the conflict in the Middle East. That is not true. This is about Australia. It's about the society we are. It's about the values we uphold. It's about us being able to live harmoniously together by allowing for the respectful difference of opinions and not allowing that to degenerate into violence, intimidation and harassment. Because, you know, the only way that a country like Australia, made up of multiple faiths, multiple ethnicities, people of different languages, colours, backgrounds, can get along as if we respect some fundamental norms. And that is what is really being tested over the last 14 months, and that is what we are failing to uphold.
Spot on, Dave Sharma. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.